Everybody was saying I'm a warmonger, and now they say I'm a dove. And I think I'm neither, if you want to know the truth. I'm a man with common sense, and that's what we need in this country, is common sense. I come from New York City. In New York City, we have a lot of Iranians, and they're great people. I have friends that are Iranians, many friends. Living in New York City, you meet many Iranians. They're very smart, they're very ambitious, they have they're high-quality people. But I have many friends that are Iranians. I don't want to kill 150 Iranians. I understand it. I don't want to kill 150 of anything or anybody unless it's absolutely necessary. But if Iran wants to become a wealthy nation again, become a prosperous nation, we'll call it, let's make Iran great again. Does that make sense? Make Iran great again. It's okay with me. But they're never going to do it if they think in 5 or 6 years they're going to have a nuclear weapon. I know too much about nuclear, a lot about nuclear, and let me just tell you, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. There was a plane with 38 people yesterday. Did you see that? I think that's a big story. They had it in their sights and they didn't shoot it down. I think they were very wise not to do that, and we appreciate that they didn't do that. We have a tremendously powerful military force in that area. It's always on the table until we get this out. Thank you.
Vice President Pence, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Jay. Good to be with you.
So over the weekend, the Iranians said they had reached out to the U.S. through the Swiss. Have you received that message? Has there been any dialogue with Iran, either directly or through an intermediary, since the president called off the strikes?
Well, the president's message to Iran is very clear, that we are not going to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, and we're not going to stand by while Iran continues to sow malign influence across the region. That's why tomorrow the president will announce additional sanctions against Iran. And frankly, as we sit here today, since the end of the Iran nuclear deal now a year ago, and additional sanctions that the United States is imposing, Iran's economy is literally crumbling. And over the last 2 months, we've seen them lashing out even more than they usually do. Remember, Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They've sown malign influence, even in the wake of the Iran nuclear deal in places like Yemen and elsewhere.
Yeah, so they're lashing.
This president drew an end to that. We've isolated them economically and diplomatically, and they've lashed out. The tanker attack a week ago, the attack on an American UAV last week. The president's made it clear that we are not going to tolerate any threats against American forces, American interests, America's allies in the region, and will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon.
So they're lashing out, but my question was, are they reaching out too? Did you get that message from the Swiss that the Iranians delivered?
I'm not aware of any outreach from the Iranians. I know there was communication. Prime Minister Abe was actually in Tehran not long ago.
Okay.
And he encouraged them, as President Trump has done publicly, to engage the United States. The President of the United States has made it clear we're prepared to talk to Iran without preconditions.
Right.
But Iran needs to understand that we will never allow them to obtain a nuclear weapon, and we will not allow them to continue to sow violence across this region.
Well, let me ask you a question.
In the midst of all of that, the actions the president took, the actions that we'll announce yesterday, the president demonstrated the restraint that the American people, I know, admire and are grateful for when, as right up to the run-up of a military attack, the president continued to evaluate that decision and concluded that what had been initiated and was about to be launched was not proportionate.
Would be disproportionate, exactly.
But Iran should not mistake restraint for a lack of resolve.
Well,
all options remain on the table.
Yeah.
The United States is going to defend our troops and America's interests in the region.
But your assertion that the United States, that Iran should not mistake that for lack of resolve, reminds me of what Bolton said not long ago where he said nobody should mistake this as weakness. And it makes me wonder if you are concerned it will be perceived that way. Before the strike, Senator Lindsey Graham tweeted, quote, "I have found that inaction in the face of evil and provocation ultimately has its own cost. In some instances, failing to act can prove to be the most dangerous choice of all." Now, you initially supported the military strike against Iran. Do you agree that there is a risk that Iran will get the wrong message from the president's restraint, as you put it?
Well, let me be clear. I've said before that weakness arouses evil, but this president has rebuilt our military to the point that the United States military forces in the region and around the world are stronger than ever before. In fact, in the wake of the tanker attacks just a week ago, the president announced that we were moving another 1,000 troops into the region. And I expect Iran and our allies in the region have no doubt about the military capabilities of the United States of America.
But
I believe that's probably
isn't willing to pull the trigger. Is that a concern at all?
Well, I think the president was encouraged that Iran actually announced that they were tracking a manned American surveillance aircraft on Friday and did not fire on it, even though they believed it was in their airspace. Now, all of that
wasn't
convinces us. No, of course not. All of that gives us some sense that in Iran they understand the military capabilities of the United States of America. But this is a president who's always going to count the cost. And I was there through the course of the deliberations. Over the last week, in the wake of the tanker attacks, the president was talking about options. In the wake of the attack on the unmanned UAV, there were extensive discussions. But at the end of the day, the president looked at the potential loss of human life relative to an unmanned American drone that had been shot down and concluded that that was not proportionate.
But you supported it, though, right? You supported the strike initially.
Well, first off, Jake, I never talk about my discussions with the President of the United States.
But it has been reported that you, Bolton, Pompeo, all supported the strike.
I think all of the national security team around this president supported providing him the broadest range of options, including the use of military force. But the president's the one that makes the decision. And as he indicated very late in the process, he was given an estimate that just simply was unacceptable to him.
150.
And this is a president. I think, I hope that this is also a message to the Iranian people. This is a president who hopes for the best for the people of Iran. It was the United States back in 2009 in the midst of the Green Revolution that you remember, Jake, that we stood with and spoke on behalf of the people of Iran, the establishment of freedom and democracy in Iran. We saw protests a year ago all across this country.
Okay, I want to ask about something
we want the best for the people of Iran, but we will stand up to the Ayatollahs. We will stand up to their provocations. And Iran should never doubt the capabilities of the armed forces of the United States.
So you said that President Trump got that information late in the process. And that's confusing to me, and it's confusing to a defense official I spoke to who said, anytime military options are presented to the president, the potential casualty assessment, the battle assessment, is one of the first things that the president would be told. Now, President Trump said yesterday that he got, quote, very odd numbers early on in terms of the assessment, the casualty assessment. What does that mean? And why would the president have only gotten the casualty numbers, as you put it, very late in the process?
Well, look, what I can tell you without talking about the details of those deliberations is that the president was provided with casualty assessments and a whole range of information
but only
relative to the military strikes that the president really threw out.
Okay.
But as the president indicated, late in the process, there were more specific projections given to him relative to the targets that he was prepared to use force against. And he concluded that it was not a proportionate response to shooting down an unmanned American aircraft. You also remember the president. The president also had doubts as to whether or not the downing of our unmanned aircraft was actually authorized at the highest levels. I can't speak about intelligence that the United States has with regard to that, but you heard the president reflect openly.
That it might have been a rogue general.
We're not convinced that it was authorized at the highest levels. The president put a regard for human life first. He also put on the table that we want better for the people of Iran. But Iran needs to understand that the United States of America will never allow them to obtain a usable nuclear weapon. This is the leading state sponsor of terrorism. And the truth that the world has seen over the last 40 years is that the Ayatollahs in Iran have no regard for human life. They sow terrorism around the region, around the world.
Would you sit down?
It is unacceptable that they would ever obtain a nuclear weapon as a threat to us, to our ally Israel, or to the wider world.